41 unforced errors. That is what it took for Daniil Medvedev to lose that semi-final in Rome. But here's the number that should actually be dominating the conversation right now. One. One medical timeout that should never have been granted. One intervention that, by the sport's own written rules, was illegal. And yet there sat Jannik Sinner getting his quadriceps massaged courtside while Daniil Medvedev stood at the baseline, arms folded, visibly seething, completely powerless to do a single thing about it. I've been watching professional tennis for a long time, and I cannot recall a moment where the gap between what the rule book says and what actually happens on court has felt this grotesque. The ATP has a rule, it is not ambiguous, it is not open to interpretation, that explicitly prohibits players from receiving physiotherapy treatment for cramps. You can call the physio, you can have them assess you, but the moment that physio starts working on a cramping muscle, you are in violation. And what did we watch happen on the clay of the Foro Italico? We watched a physio work on Sinner's quadriceps for the better part of 3 minutes. Jamie Murray said it on Sky Sports, and I respect him for saying it plainly. He's getting treated for cramp essentially. He's getting his quads massaged. So it happens a lot, obviously. I don't agree with it personally. Tim Henman echoed that sentiment. These are not fringe analysts. These are former elite players watching the same thing everyone watching at home was watching. A rule being bent so far it should have snapped. Now, before you start typing in the comments that I'm being dramatic, I want to address something directly. The argument you always hear in these situations is that umpires and supervisors have to make a judgment call on the spot. They can't always know with certainty whether it's cramp or something more serious, a muscle spasm that mimics cramping, a genuine orthopedic issue that presents similarly. And I understand that argument to a point. But I was looking at the tape, and what I noticed is that the moment Sinner received that treatment, his physical decline essentially reversed. He won the third set. He closed out the match. The very physical crisis that had appeared so dire that it warranted stopping play and calling a physio, that crisis evaporated in the time it takes to order a coffee. Now you tell me what that looks like. Medvedev went to the umpire. He asked point blank, when we call the physio for cramp, we don't get fined. And that question, that specific phrasing tells you everything. He wasn't asking out of ignorance. He wasn't confused about the rule. He was pointing to the absurdity of a situation where the rule exists, everyone in that stadium knows the rule exists, and somehow the rule is simply not being applied. His anger in that moment was completely justified. I'd go further. It was restrained, frankly, given the circumstances, because what Medvedev was watching was his opponent essentially receive a free reset at a pivotal juncture in the match. He'd fought back to take the second set, he had momentum, and then the clock just stopped for Sinner at the exact moment Sinner needed it most. Now, here's the bit that actually bothers me. And this is not about Sinner or Alcaraz as individuals, because I genuinely believe both of them are among the greatest talents this sport has produced in a generation. But patterns matter. At the Australian Open earlier this year, Alexander Zverev lodged almost identical complaints about Carlos Alcaraz receiving preferential treatment during their semi final. Same situation, cramp, physio, treatment. And Alcaraz went on to win. And if you're thinking right now that it might be a coincidence that the two biggest names in the sport both seem to benefit from this particular blind spot in officiating, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong because I can't, because the data doesn't let me. This is actually where Roger Federer's comments become relevant and uncomfortable in ways that didn't fully register when he first made them. Federer suggested there was a degree of favoritism towards Sinner and Alcaraz at the institutional level, that the sport was, consciously or not, protecting its golden era. At the time, plenty of people dismissed that as an old champion being somewhat curmudgeonly about the passing of time. But when you have Zverev making the exact same argument in Melbourne and Medvedev making the exact same argument in Rome, and you have former players on broadcast television agreeing with both of them, Federer's words start sounding less like nostalgia and more like diagnosis. I was looking at the tape from the second set specifically. Look at the point at 3-4, where Sinner double faulted on a second serve at 30-40. His movement to that point in the set had already become noticeably labored. His split step was late, his first step drive off the baseline was sluggish, and his kick serve, which in normal conditions generates enormous topspin RPM and kicks up into the body beautifully, had lost a significant amount of pop. He was genuinely struggling. I'm not disputing that, but struggling is part of professional tennis. Medvedev had managed those same conditions. Casper Ruud had managed those same conditions earlier in the day against Luciano Darderi without incident. The conditions don't change the rule, and the rule says no physio treatment for cramps. The practical fix here is not actually that complicated, which is what makes the sport's failure to implement it so maddening. Other sports have figured this out. Rugby has a blood bin protocol with strict time limits and independent medical verification. Cricket has a specific medical review process for retirement and return. Tennis could and should implement a mandatory independent courtside medical officer who makes the call on whether treatment is permissible. Not the player's physio, who has every incentive in the world to call anything other than a cramp. An independent official, someone whose job it is to protect the integrity of the competition, not the health of any particular player's tournament run. It is genuinely not a radical suggestion. If you're a purist, you're going to hate this, but the current system is essentially an honor system. And honor systems work when everyone is incentivized to honor them. In a Grand Slam semifinal, in a Masters 1000 semifinal, when careers and rankings and prize money are on the line, nobody is incentivized to honor anything. Players are incentivized to win. That is not a criticism. That is sport, but it means the governance structure has to be airtight. And right now, it has a hole in it large enough to drive a physio trolley through. Here is where I land on this heading into the clay season finale and beyond. Jannik Sinner will very likely win Roland Garros. His ball striking right now, when fully fit, is at a level that even on clay gives Alcaraz genuine problems. His inside out forehand on the clay in Rome, when he was functioning properly, was generating angles that Medvedev's baseline aggression simply couldn't neutralize. He is the best player in the world, and he will probably prove that again in Paris. But the manner of his survival in Rome, that is a stain. Not on Sinner personally. He called the physio, and that is within his rights. The stain is on the ATP, on the umpiring structure, and on a supervisory apparatus that watched a rule get broken in plain sight and decided that was acceptable. Medvedev deserved better. Every player who has lost a match in similar circumstances deserved better. And frankly, the sport deserves better than an integrity conversation that keeps coming back again and again because nobody in authority has had the courage to close the loophole for good. The next time we see this happen, and unless something changes, we will see this happen, the conversation won't be about one match in Rome. It'll be about whether professional tennis can actually govern itself. And that is a conversation the ATP cannot afford to have. The clock is ticking. And unlike Sinner's cramping episode, nobody is going to pause it. Win Roland Garros. His ball striking right now, when fully fit, is at a level that even on clay gives Alcaraz genuine problems. His inside out forehand on the clay in Rome, when he was functioning properly, was generating angles that Medvedev's baseline aggression simply couldn't neutralize. He is the best player in the world, and he will probably prove that again in Paris. But the manner of his survival in Rome, that is a stain. Not on Sinner personally. He called the physio, and that is within his rights. The stain is on the ATP, on the umpiring structure, and on a supervisory apparatus that watched a rule get broken in plain sight and decided that was